So Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows was originally supposed to be the end of the Harry Potter saga, but there was some ambiguity, some unanswered questions in the Deathly Hallows, and in 2016 a new stage play arrived on the London stage which takes the Harry Potter saga further. The name of it is Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and the events in this stage play, and the script is now available in a book, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, takes us forward 19 years after the time that Harry and Draco and Ron and Hermione and Ginny took their children to Hogwarts to leave and head out on the Hogwarts Express. And of course the Harry Potter franchise is one of the most popular movie franchises of all time, and it's one of the most popular book franchises of all time. It made a very rich woman out of J.K. Rowling, and Potter fans always wanted more. There were those ambiguous questions that people wanted answered, and some of those were finally answered. Now in this book that J.K. Rowling, actually a stage play, and the script is available in book form, that J.K. Rowling wrote to take it a little bit further and answer some of those questions. And I just finished reading this the other day, and there are some satisfying answers to questions that we maybe wondered about in the past. Harry named his middle child, his son, Albus Severus Potter. And at the end of the movie, in the end of the book, The Deathly Hallows, we see that he's about to leave for Hogwarts, and he's afraid that he's going to be sorted in Slytherin. And Harry reassures him that no, you have a choice. The sorting hat takes your choice into account, and you can be sorted into Gryffindor. Well, Harry makes a new friend, and he ends up being Albus, that is, makes a new friend. He ends up being Albus's best friend. The two actually become very close. And this new best friend of all people is Scorpius Malfoy, the son of the famous, or maybe infamous, Draco Malfoy. They become very good friends, but Albus doesn't adjust too well to Hogwarts. He has difficulty living up to the expectations, and Harry has difficulty being a father, and he's now head of magical law enforcement for the Ministry of Magic. Hermione Granger herself is now the Minister of Magic, and so Albus has some problems. He's not enjoying being at Hogwarts. He doesn't take to Quidditch, and he's in this Slytherin house, doesn't have friends really to speak of except for Scorpius Malfoy, and that ends up being a really good friendship in the end. But as they head off to Hogwarts and Albus is sorted into Slytherin, the issue of Cedric Diggory, who was killed by Lord Voldemort at the end of the Goblet of Fire, arises again. Amos Diggory approaches Harry with this person who is supposedly his niece, a young woman named Delphi, and Amos wants Harry to use a time turner to go back in time and fix the situation so that he doesn't have to lose his son Cedric. And the problem is that most of the time turners were destroyed during the big row at the Order of the Phoenix, and there are actually only a couple of them left. They actually think there's only one of them left right now. And Harry tells Amos Diggory, who actually comes and calls on him at his house, that he cannot do that. He cannot go messing with time. And he's very sorry, and nobody's hurt more than he is about what happened with the loss of Cedric, and he can't do it. And Amos leaves rather angry, and he's in sort of a old folks home, not doing too well. His wife is evidently gone, and it's just Amos Diggory and this niece. Well, Albus, in his struggles, and Harry struggling to be a good father, they're having difficulties, and Albus decides that it would be a good idea to get hold of this time turner and go back in time and fix it so that Cedric Diggory lives, and he manages to do this with the help of Scorpius Malfoy. And they go back in time, and time travel, if it were to exist, it's hard to believe that time travel would exist because of all the problems that it would create, because you get all kinds of paradoxes. The person goes back in time and eliminates an ancestor, but then the situation exists where they were never born, so they couldn't possibly go back and eliminate the ancestor, and so it's a paradox that seems to be unsolvable. But Albus and Scorpius do go back, and they manage to mess everything up. Cedric Diggory not only ends up losing the Triwizard Tournament, but becomes bitter and actually becomes a Death Eater. And eventually he ends up killing Neville Longbottom, who of course killed the snake. And the first go-round creates all kinds of problems. It messes up Ron and Hermione's marriage, it does away with their children, and it just causes all sorts of problems. And so they get back to normal time, and then they decide that they've got to go back and try again. So Albus and Scorpius Malfoy do go back in time again with this time turner that they have stolen from the Ministry of Magic, supposedly the only one left. And they go back, and this time Scorpius and Albus manage to rewrite history so that Neville Longbottom is killed, and then Harry dies at the Battle of Hogwarts, and Lord Voldemort is victorious. And when Scorpius emerges from the lake in this new world, Albus is gone. He finds himself at Hogwarts. Dolores Umbridge, of all people, is the headmaster of Hogwarts. Voldemort is ruling the wizarding world. People are being persecuted, and it's somebody's idea of hell has become reality because of this messing with time, trying to fix time. Well, he then sets out on a quest to go back and fix things again, and he does so with the help of none other than Severus Snape, who lives in this alternative timeline. And it's so funny in a way, because Scorpius, in his running around Hogwarts hiding, stumbles into this classroom, and there, of all people, is Professor Snape, who it turns out has been leading the underground all these years, some 20 years now. We got hints that Professor Snape was really a good guy in the original book series, but still there's more ambiguity than most of us would like. But Scorpius goes back and he explains what's happened to create all this hell to Professor Snape. And when he first walks into the classroom, he's amazed to see Snape there, and he said, "Severus Snape, I'm truly honored." And Snape says, "Well, you know, that's great, but Professor Snape would do just fine." And they get in a conversation, and then Scorpius explains what has happened. And Severus agrees that they need to go back and fix everything that happened, and Scorpius tells him some things that happened so that Harry won the battle and everything was right with the wizarding world. And so he was telling various people what happened to them, and Professor Snape says, "Well, presumably I'm dead, and you were a little too surprised to see me." And Scorpius confirms that indeed Professor Snape died in the original effort to win the Battle of Hogwarts. But nevertheless, Professor Snape is very moved by the fact that Scorpius tells him that Harry Potter considered him to be a great man, and indeed named his son after him, Albus Severus Potter. And they make the decision to go back to the Black Lake and try to fix it again. And you know, Snape tells Scorpius, would he please relay the message that he is so happy that Harry named his son after him. And then, very heroically, Severus Snape helps Scorpius to go back in time, and once again he gives his life. And that is one of the most satisfying things in this book, because you see that not only is Professor Snape a good guy, he's a tremendously good guy. He was a double agent. He was acting in a role. If he was performing in an American movie, he ought to get an Academy Award because he played that role so well, and he did it all for the good. And he sacrifices his life a second time. But this Delphi, who is supposedly Amos Diggory's niece, is running around in the present reality, and her mission wasn't really to bring back Seguri. That was all a ruse. because Delphi is actually Lord Voldemort's daughter, who was born before the Battle of Hogwarts. And she is a product of a union between Voldemort and guess who? Bellatrix Lestrange, and she had actually been born at Malfoy Manor before the Battle of Hogwarts. But she wants her father to win. She wants to meet her father and then be at his side. So she's messing around back in time, trying to screw everything up, and decides to go back to Godric Hollow and prevent Voldemort from killing James and Lily Potter, and from trying to kill Harry Potter, so that the timeline will be different and Voldemort will survive and they'll have a relationship, and he may win anyway because he didn't kill the Potters. Well, as Scorpius and Albus are running around messing around in time, everybody else is all in crisis trying to figure out where they are, and Harry has a meeting with Dumbledore. See, in the Wizarding world, dead people sort of live on in their portraits and their paintings, and it's in a hospital room during one of these in-between times, and Dumbledore speaks to Harry from a painting, and they have some unresolved issues that they want to work out. And Harry is so disappointed, and he can't understand why Dumbledore didn't help him more, why he didn't warn him, why he didn't prepare him better for this whole thing. And Dumbledore is really saddened by this, and he says that he really loved Harry, but that every time he loved, he hurts everybody he loves. That he has never loved without causing hurt and destruction. And so they are able to resolve these issues with Dumbledore essentially being a painting. But Albus and Scorpius do succeed in getting back to Godric Hollow right before this Delphi character is going to go intervene and screw everything up. Well, they figure out an ingenious message to send a message into the future, and these timelines get kind of confusing, and warn Harry and Ginny and Ron and Hermione what's about to happen. And so they come up with an ingenious way to get this message to them, and it arrives. And then Harry and Ron and Hermione and Draco Malfoy, and there's still some conflict between Draco and Harry to start with. They arrive on scene, and by this time Draco and Harry, and this is another very satisfying end, because we learn that Draco Malfoy turns out to be a good guy as well, and he and Harry actually become friends. And so that's a very satisfying thing, because there's always this question about Draco Malfoy. He seems a bit like a very evil character, but in a sense, in both the movies and the book, you can see that he's getting sort of pushed into it. He doesn't necessarily want to be a bad person, but his family situation is such that he's pushed into being on the dark side. But he and Harry put aside their differences, and they all agree that they don't want Voldemort to come back and win. And so Draco and Ron and Hermione and Ginny and Harry all go back to help Albus and Scorpius thwart this Delphi. And they accomplish it by the following means. They use transfiguration they don't have sufficient Polyjuice potions, so they use transfiguration to turn Harry into Lord Voldemort. And Lord Voldemort, Delphi sees him, and Harry, pretending to be Lord Voldemort, lures Delphi into this church. But before they have a chance to deal with her, they're all going to do it at once, she discovers who he is, and they have a brief battle in the church. But Albus, who is waiting outside, climbs through this ductwork and gets into the church and casts a spell that opens up the doors, and then Draco and Hermione and Ginny and the rest of them all come running in, and they all cast spells at the same time, and they bind this Delphi. And the question is, should they kill her? Well, it turns out they don't. They're going to take her back and send her to Azkaban. And so, through the efforts of Albus Severus Potter and his new best friend, Scorpius Malfoy, and they do end up as best friends, they're actually very close. In spite of the fact that Harry thinks that Scorpius is a bad guy and he tries to separate them for a while, but they end up being, close as brothers, closer than brothers or something like that. But Albus and Scorpius, in concert with the adults, they save the day once again. They get this Delphi, they bind her, they take her back to Azkaban, and once again all is well in the wizarding world. And then Harry and Albus are able to work out their differences, and it seems like things are moving forward in a very positive direction. And one interesting passage, when the adults first arrive at Godric's Hollow to fix everything, it starts on page 273, and this is Ron talking, and he said, "Malfoy, you may be all chummy with Harry, and you may have produced a relatively nice child, but you've said some very unfair things to me about me and my wife." And Hermione speaks up and says, "And your wife doesn't need you fighting your battles for her." And Ron says, "Fine, but if you say one thing about her or me," and Draco says, "You'll do what, Weasley?" And Hermione says, "He'll hug you, because we're all on the same team, aren't we, Ron?" And then Ron says, "Fine, I think you've got really nice hair, Draco." And then they're able to go forward and work together and save the wizarding world once again. But what happens is Voldemort does arrive on the scene, and he does kill James and Lily Potter once again. And then Hagrid goes in to rescue young Harry again, and it plays out like this. Hagrid walks through the ruins of the house. Hagrid says, "James," says Lily. He says, "Oh no, that's not, they told me, but I was hoping for better." And he says, "I'm sorry he told me, Dumbledore told me, I can't wait with you. Them muggles are coming, you see, with their flashing blues, and they won't appreciate a big lummox like me, would they? Hard to leave you, though." And he's crying. And he says, "I want you to know you won't be forgotten, not by me, not by any folk." And, this is right after it happened. And so he looks down at Harry's crib and he says, "Well, hello, you must be Harry. Hello, Harry Potter. I'm Rubeus Hagrid, and I'm going to be your friend whether you like it or not, because you've had it tough, not that you know it yet, and you're going to need some friends. Now, you best come with me, don't you think?" And they leave as the blue lights start flashing in the house, because it's been a huge explosion and now the muggles are on the way. Well, all is right with the world again, and then toward the end, Harry and Albus are working out their differences through this difficulty they've been, and he actually takes Albus to visit Cedric Diggory's grave, because he says, and he likes to come and visit Cedric's grave and say that he's sorry periodically, and Albus says, "Well, that's a nice thing to do." And so the entire story finally comes to a somewhat satisfying, or more satisfying, conclusion than you had in the Deathly Hallows. Professor Snape, Draco Malfoy, you have to be careful about judging people, because Snape and Malfoy do turn out to be really good guys in the end. And Scorpius Malfoy, Draco's son, is a great guy too. And people can change, and they can change in sometimes really good and unexpected ways, and that can actually happen in real life. Will we see this in film? Warner Brothers has actually acquired film rights. If they do persuade the principal actors to come back, maybe we might see that in film sometimes. I think Potter fans everywhere would really love to see that, especially if it's Daniel and Rupert and Emma once again. And it could go forward. J.K. Rowling says she's not that interested in Harry and the others as an adult. But, Voldemort is finally vanquished, and his family's vanquished too. But there are possibilities. They could explore different adventures that the adults get into as adults if they wanted to. I don't know that J.K. Rowling is inclined to do that, but it's a possibility. She could carry the story forward with Scorpius Malfoy and Albus Potter if she wanted to, and that could be very interesting, but who knows if she'll do that. And so that, as far as we know, is the conclusion of the Harry Potter series. And I've given you a lot of information, a lot of spoilers, but if you want to see how it plays out, you should go read it for yourself. Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, I think a great appendage to the story, check it out for yourself. It's a very satisfying read, I think. And there's still further character analysis to be done. I still want to talk some more about Professor Snape and Draco Malfoy and Minerva McGonagall and others, but as far as the storyline, that completes it as far as we know. The Harry Potter series, one of the most beloved series of all time. Thanks and have a good day.